Good morning, Decred dorks. We're gonna try that as I guess kind of an intro. It's 5 a.m. Hello, hello, hello. Oklahoma time, Central Time. I'm just now waking up. It's 5:14 technically. And one thing I'm really concerned with today is the audio because on the last podcast I was very dissatisfied with the audio. I have this mic in front of me. I don't know if it's working though. If there's anyone in there in the live chat, if the audio sounds like good, hold on. No, I don't think that's okay. Well, know that I'm working on the audio, guys. That is something I definitely want to do. I definitely want to improve the audio quality on these streams. And so this is just a little bit of trial and error for me. But welcome back to the second episode of the Staked Podcast. Today's episode is going to be dedicated exclusively to talking about Decred, which I'm very excited about. I want to start off just with thank yous because my first episode had such tremendous feedback from the community, and it just feels like very encouraging. And I don't know if I even said this in the last episode, but I have been like very intimidated to talk about Decred and start this podcast, which is interesting because I'm really like the type of person who will just put himself out there typically. But I think it's just because I hold the Decred community in such high regards, and I know I'm not like a technical expert, right? Like I study as much as I can. I've taken like 2 classes as an undergraduate in programming, so I'm no Mark Zuckerberg, but I get the principles of programming, and that's very helpful. I get some of the principles of software development, and it's very important because when you talk about crypto projects and Decred in particular, probably the second most important like thing right behind security of the project and of the blockchain is the quality of the development team. And there's just been so much. I mean, you can't speak more highly of the Decred development team. Um, and today we're going to get into a little bit of the history behind that team and how Decred came to be. Today's episode is a history episode. I think I said on the last podcast it was going to be about the Constitution, but it's not. That'll be probably the next episode. Today is a history episode. And it's very important because you have to know where you're going in order to know, or you have to know where you've been in order to know where you're going. And how was everyone's weekend? Before we get into it, I just want to do some housewarming things. I hope everyone had a good weekend. As you guys probably know, and I'll say this every podcast, I'm never going to hammer it over the head though, but this is a donation driven podcast. So please show your support by donating some atoms. 10 million atoms is only less than $2. And so that will go a long ways in helping me get to my goal, which is eventually to own a full ticket. I was almost halfway there, and then the ticket price shot up very recently, which reminds me, let's go ahead and go look at the Block Explorer so we can. You guys will come to realize I'm a terrible multitasker. Yeah, so this is something I want to start doing because it's something that they do on Tales from the Crypt, and I think it's very smart. Just go over some of the stats. We're on dcrdata.decred.org, and right now the current ticket price is at 152.92 DCR. So I'm actually more than halfway there at that price. The voting rewards is still 0.86 Decred. That'll decrease by 0.5% in 30 days. Total DCR staked is about 6 million, or 50% of circulating supply. The hash rate is at 402 petahashes. And I thought this would have the price somewhere. We are on proposed block number 480,706. Yeah, there it is. And the exchange rate is $16.82. So that is where we are today, August 31st, 5 a.m. Oklahoma time. And thank you for the like, whoever is on the live stream. It means a lot to me. This weekend was very exciting for me. I got to go comic book exploring. Got some 80s comic books. That's like, in my opinion, like the prime time of Marvel publishing was like late 70s, early 80s. Got some Fantastic Four. I don't know if you guys can see, it's kind of like a glare. Probably post over there. Yeah, that's better. Marvel Tales starring Spider-Man. This one I'm really excited to read. Yeah, so I'm a huge Marvel geek too, which is why I want to, let me explain where the Decred Dork thing comes from, because look, I'm a huge nerd, like just point blank. I've always been a huge nerd, always been into comic books, always been into video games, always been into reading. I've always been kind of like, I guess, an extroverted person, very much like put myself out there, and I guess maybe a rambunctious, obnoxious kid. So I wasn't like the kid who was like in the corner, like, huddled away, not doing anything. But I've always been attracted to, I guess, nerd culture, if you will, anime, manga. It's deeply rooted in me. And dude, nerds, they told us back in the 90s, they told us this was going to happen. They said they said, be nice to the nerds because the nerds are going to rule the world. Be nice to the dork in your class because he's going to be your boss. And it's just funny because, I mean, some of the earliest adopters of this technology are really smart, nerdy people. And, what we're talking about here is, for the first time, you're able to create and transfer value over the internet. That's the summary. You're able to create and transfer, whether that be a token, whether that be a currency, whether that be an NFT. You are able to assign property rights over the internet. And this is what gets me so excited about Decred in this space. As someone who, is studying law and has wanted to be a lawyer for a very long time, I get excited about securing life, liberty, and property through the use of technology and freedom enabling technologies, increasing freedom of commerce and freedom of trade. Decred, anyone can download the wallet. You guys go back and watch the first episode. It took me 2 minutes. You can download the wallet on any app, on any phone. You can get access to Decred right away. Now, onboarding, I'll be doing some tutorials later in the future, but onboarding and buying your first Decred, that a little bit more of a process, but just to receive Decred, it takes no time at all. And it's very powerful. It's very, very powerful tool. I don't know if it's just something like in the weather or something. I still feel very congested. So I have some water here. And I also have my llama mug of coffee just to wake me up today. I've been trying to stay away from coffee, but today I needed it. Last night was a long night of staying up, finishing my readings. And I want this to be kind of like a Monday morning podcast live stream. That's what I'm aiming for. I'm kind of afraid to say that because I just don't know what the future holds and I don't want to like let people down. But I mean, this will definitely be a once a week thing. Even if it's just a small podcast, I will force myself to make a podcast once a week until the end of this year. So let's jump into Decred and the history of Decred. I'm going to be reading from some notes, so hopefully I don't miss anything. And if anything in this is inaccurate, I probably should quote. Yes. Thank you to Noah, because a lot of this came from his Decred where did it all begin post. I also included here at the bottom. I'll also include links to the JYK posts. I don't exactly remember what that means, but hopefully as I go through this, I'll remember what it means. So Decred begins in 2013. Those of you familiar with Bitcoin, everyone watching this is probably familiar with Bitcoin. Bitcoin was conceived in 2008 and then launched in 2009. In the midst of the financial crisis, everyone's familiar with the very infamous note within the first block in which Satoshi Nakamoto gives reference to an article published that day. I believe the title of that article is Chancellor on the Brink of Bank Bailout. And so you have this backdrop of crisis that, as we look retrospectively, we know was caused by the banks themselves and collateralized debt obligations and rehypothecation. And I believe Jake Yoakum Pyatt refers to these things as games, essentially, just games that politicians and financiers play. And at least from Jake's perspective, he says that Decred is about creating more fair games. And so Bitcoin was released into the wild. Hal Finney was one of the first people to participate in the network. And from there, it grew, right? And it continued to grow. And there's a long battled history of open source software, freedom enabling software, and Bitcoin in particular just kind of like was battle tested. But over time, obviously, people wanted to change Bitcoin, and they found that it was very difficult to change because, well, you couldn't get anyone to agree on anything. And so ultimately what would happen is that nothing would really change. And so we find ourselves in the middle of spring of 2013 when an anonymous gentleman by the name of Taco Time responds to a post on the Bitcoin Talk forum titled, "Want to make an altcoin that actually changes something?" Person quotes, "I've had something in mind for a while. Just need people with time to code. I can write the technical specifications and the pseudocode algorithms." So this is April 3rd, and Taco Time is basically saying, let's make something new that actually does something different, unlike all the other copycats that we've seen so far, right? There's been tons of, actually don't know when Monero launched, but there's been tons of other coins that have launched at this time. I don't think Monero had actually launched yet because Taco Time eventually, if you're listening to this, you probably know, goes on to work on Monero. But I think what's important here is that Taco Time very much comes from cyberpunk ethos. And we know this because he's anonymous. And we know this because cypherpunks write code. And Taco Time isn't putting out a white paper. He's creating a call to action. He's saying, I can write the technical specifications. and I'll write the pseudocode. So I'll do, I mean, depending on the programmer's perspective, 50% of the work. And I just need people who have time to program. So on April 7th, Memcoin 2 is launched, and Memcoin 2, MC2, is a democratic cryptocurrency based on hybrid proof of work, proof of stake system. Memcoin 2 also has a double entendre for M equals MC squared, or whatever that formula is. I think it something of that nature. The Einstein formula. Everyone knows what I'm talking about. E equals MC squared. There it is. Which is very interesting because proof of work requires the burning of electricity. And so, to give reference to Einstein's equation of energy, which is basically that energy is not created or destroyed, it is just changes form, right? I think is very clever. And so, for the remainder of 2013, Taco Time spends his time trying to coordinate the project and funding. But he doesn't do this alone. Which books have changed you the most, Frank? I would definitely say the Bitcoin Standard has changed me the most. It was the book that opened my mind to Bitcoin, but changed me personally. Atlas Shrugged was a big one. Atlas Shrugged changed the way I view, I guess, entrepreneurship and putting yourself out there, and like not Atlas Shrugged, Fountainhead. I like Howard Rourke a lot better because he just doesn't give a damn what anyone thinks. Atlas Shrugged was very interesting from a socio-political perspective, but Fountainhead was very impactful in my life. And also Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, because I was deeply depressed when I got expelled from university back in 2017. And Jordan Peterson's book helped me get out of that dark place. So thank you for that question, Frank. We're going to go back now to the remainder of 2013. Taco Time, he's coordinating this project. He's trying to get funding, but he does so along the help of another anonymous character, which I'm not entirely sure how you pronounce this gentleman's name, but he goes by _ Ingsoc, INGSOC. And what's amazing about Ingsoc is that no one knows his identity. It's completely unknown. And it's very important. It's very important that two things for successful cryptocurrencies or blockchain projects, whatever you want to call it. And one of them is anonymity of development teams and people developing the project, because it's a central point of failure, right? If people know who's responsible for the project, they know who to go to shut it down. And so whenever you have anonymous developers, it empowers the community. And it's very interesting here at this time that Taco Time is trying to coordinate the project, and he's trying to get funding, because these are going to go on, you'll see, to be some of the biggest issues, not only in Bitcoin, but some of the main things that differentiate Decred and make it unique compared to other cryptocurrency projects. Ingsoc not releasing his identity also follows the cypherpunk ethos, which I believe that values drive projects. You have to have the right values. If the right values are not there from the beginning, if you're doing some secret pre-mines like Ethereum, where 60% of the initial supply was given to investors, I mean, this sort of behavior, it drives the rest of the narrative. It drives your decisions. It drives poor decisions. And this is why, in my opinion, you've seen Ethereum make some of the unfortunate trade-offs that they have regarding centralization and forking. But back to Decred. So we fast forward to October 15th of 2013. Taco Time posts on the Bitcoin Talk forum that he is looking for a lead developer. He's already published point 4 version of the software, Memcoin 2, but he adds something very interesting. He says that he is interested in establishing a peer-to-peer marketplace inside the chain for people to exchange coins for goods. And I believe that this is the origins of the DEX and other chain features that the community may govern the coin to adopt in the future. And this is very powerful because, as we've seen, when you put people in the middle of transactions, or you give them the opportunity to take away from, I'm trying to think of the correct word, but basically serve as middlemen. They'll just try to take a cut of the transaction, right? That is my alarm to wake up, but I'm already awake, so sorry about that. They'll try to take a piece of the pie, and the origins of the DEX is that there is no one in between, right? And I think it's very interesting that Taco Time was already thinking about creating a marketplace inside the chain, right? Because right now, even with Bitcoin, marketplaces serve on the application layer, or actually above the application layer, because they're on the human layer of interaction. And to be able to create a marketplace inside the chain whereby one could buy goods and services without ever having to go off chain. Look, there's always going to be humans involved in these sort of things. So like, there is a need for trust, and a need for reputation, and a need for brand, and a need for law. But to be able to cut out Amazon from transactions, to be able to cut out Walmart from the exchanging of goods and services, I believe this is a very powerful thing, and I believe it's ultimately good for society. Frank, thank you for your second question. Frank says in the chat, I'm sorry, but one more question. Do you think being successful depends on luck and sizing opportunities, or planning and organizing? It's a good time for a coffee break. Frank, this is a question out of my expertise, to be quite honest, because I don't see myself as being successful, but I have studied successful people. And I believe that luck obviously plays an important aspect of everyone's life: where you're born, who you were born to, how much money you were made, what is your IQ. These are all very luck oriented things. However, I have come to believe that these things do not in any way shape one's potential to become successful. And I believe that ultimately it is one's mindset and one's ability to persevere, grit. Planning and organization is very important. Obviously, if you don't know where you're going, you won't know how to get there. I don't know if that even makes sense. Maybe it's, if you don't know how to get there, you won't know where you're going. No, it's definitely the other way around. If you don't know where you're going, you won't know how to get there. And look, I mean, the reason I launched this podcast is because of my goals. It's because I set a goal and I kind of planned. And then you have to create the patterns. You have to create the patterns to reach that goal. And I believe that success comes from, more so than anything, patience and speed. Yeah, I got that from Gary Vee straight up, but he's been very impactful in my life. Not judging yourself as well. Ambition and patience. Doing small things every day, waking up and recording this podcast once a week. Okay. So that's towards the end of 2013. You know, the origins of the DEX and other on-chain features. I just find that very interesting. We're already at 0.4 version of Memcoin 2, and by 2014, Taco Time starts working on Monero. Monero is a privacy-focused currency forked from Bytecoin. And this is very important in the history of Decred because I believe it's during this time that Taco Time, not only, I'm sure he already understood the importance of privacy, but probably that he starts to gain some of his philosophical beliefs about how to best implement privacy, right? Because there's privacy of quantity, how much I am sending, and there's also privacy of identity. Who am I sending it to and who is sending? And there's many different ways you can construct privacy. Zcoin or Zcash has decided to use some very complicated mathematical ZK snarks, which I don't know if it's I don't know what to call it, a formula or algorithm or mathematics. Just important to know that there's trade-offs in using this mathematics, namely auditability and trusted setup. And Jake Yoakum did a very good article where he contrasts some of the privacy coins, Gin, Decred, or Grin, Decred, Monero, Bitcoin, Zcash. Monero is privacy by default. I find that extremely interesting. It's a great project, and Monero uses ring signatures to obfuscate who is sending. They also mix amounts so you don't know how much you're sending, and they also do Tor transactions, so you can't go back to an IP address. So there's just many facets of privacy, and Monero is a private through Coin Shuffle Plus, which I'm not going to get too much into because I would have to do some research before wanting to talk more about it. Maybe one day I will. But anyways, during this time of 2014, he sees how Monero works firsthand, and he also gets to see what does not work. And people think that Taco Time during this time stopped working on Memcoin 2, but secretly he had been coding on Memcoin 2 and continuing its development. And by summer of 2015, members of the Bitcoin Talk were criticizing Taco Time. They were saying, oh, he had left. This is another scam. They were just talking bad on Taco Time's name. And by November of 2015, Ingsoc reemerges on the thread, the same thread that Taco Time had originally posted, his call to action. And Ingsoc reemerges to defend Taco Time's honor. And he posts what I believe is one of the most important posts in Decred history. And so I want to read the whole thing here. It's a bit lengthy, but I believe it's one of the most important posts. And so I'm going to get a swig of water and we're going to read it from start to finish. Hey guys, not sure if anyone is still out there. The last correspondence from Taco Time in this thread was over a year ago. I spoke to him yesterday and we agreed for me to come here and share the story with you. Truth be told, the project has been a bumpy ride. It's been an uphill battle, and quite a few times it looked like it was going to end as just a theoretical piece. It was during this time that we decided to drop off the radar and get our hands dirty until we could deliver, lest we end up building hope and letting everyone down. So today, I bear good news for you. Taco Time has been coding on this for over a year now. He started solo while I searched and tried to build relationships with developers who care about this technology and the ethos behind it. We built a relationship with a group that develops the free and open source BTC Suite, formerly known as BTCD. BTC Suite is solely funded by a relatively unknown guy who I can describe as an open source philanthropist. He has been instrumental in helping us get this going. The group agreed to help us build up the project, and what we hope to present is an alt that will have the same level of quality and development consistency demonstrated by BTC Suite over the last 2.5 years since its introduction in 2013. So the good news is this: the project is alive and well and close to completion. We begin to break the silence because now we know we can deliver. But ultimately, this isn't about who developed what, it's about the community, because it'll be dead in the water without your interest in using it. I wanted to come here first and reach out to the people who have supported this project during its darkest days and hopefully for its brightest. You should receive this news first. The plan now is to have everything finished and ready to launch in January. There will be an announcement soon, and from that point on, there is going to be an open communication and transparency in every reasonable regard. Nobody will be able to own the project. Just act as contributors and custodians where required. Once the infrastructure is up, we turn on the machine and everyone is welcome. The future of the project is not a big monolithic corporation that took all your money before a line of code was written, but small dedicated teams that work with surgical precision and efficiency on building this out beyond what is launched. The whole thing was self-funded at a fraction of the cost we've seen some projects take in this community. We took the risk and time over the years knowing it can fail, and every cent we take from it to cover the bring up costs will be matched and given in full to the community for free to distribute the network effect as far and wide as possible. All of this will be documented in full at the announcement. As we work, I wanted to take a second and share this information with you if you're still out there. I look forward to getting to know you all again, and I look forward to working with you now that we're so close to this being real. In this project, if you have a voice and something meaningful to contribute, you will have a place to share that with others. My personal objective is to make sure it stays that way. Can't believe we're going to get there in the end, community. There's a couple of different takeaways from this post. Obviously, Taco Time drops off and he codes Cypherpunk's code. He's building these relationships with BTC Suite, which was built by, I'm trying to think of the name of the team. It was formerly Conformal Systems. I know it's Company Zero now. And we're going to soon talk about Jake Yoakum-Pyatt, who is the leader of that team, philanthropist, open source philanthropist that Ingsoc referred to. And, Jake is just one of those guys that I've never met, but you listen to him and there's a lot of things that drive people in the world, like no one really knows why some of the best developers go and work on Bitcoin, why some of the best developers are driven to open source and giving their time and energy towards things that are not paying them. But you can tell that Joke is just a very principle driven guy and that he's not in it for the money. He could go make more money doing a lot of other things. He's extremely talented. His skill set is extremely in high demand. And to be able to do what that team did to create a bug for bug compatible alternative to Bitcoin Core is, it's extremely difficult, guys. It's extremely, extremely difficult. I can't really think of a more difficult task other than probably trying to become an Olympian, to be quite honest. And what I like here is that from the very beginning, Ingsoc talks about look, there's certain things that if this project isn't doing, if it's not open to everyone, if it looks similar to a monolithic corporation, if it's taking money from people and not actually creating value, if it's doing these things, I don't want to be a part of it. There's a question in the box. Hey man, have you ever been into Naval Ravikant? Yes, I'm familiar with Naval. Mixed feelings about Naval, to be quite honest. He blocked me on Twitter because I called him out for his Zcash scam, and he did not like that. He got very embarrassed that he's one of those people who took a lot of money from people and who presented false promises. and he's smart enough to know better. He's smart enough to know better. Yet you haven't heard about that because he doesn't like it whenever you talk about it in that way. He'll let you talk about Zcash in different ways, but if you try to, I mean, sure, maybe I'm just defamating his name. Maybe there's more to the story, but in my opinion, you can't start a project that you claim to be a privacy focus, take millions and millions of dollars in ICOing or launching, right? Um, because there was an unfair distribution of Zcash in the very beginning. And so I believe Naval is a very smart guy. I think he's a very fragile soul, seeing as though he can't take small criticisms. He's clearly very well learned, though. And I have another account that I'm still able to see some of his threads. And I do appreciate his brain. I just think that he's not the most ethical guy. And Jake Yoakum on the other hand, is someone who I believe has very high ethics and who under promises and over delivers, and who is principled in the way that he constructs systems. And I find these to be a lot more admirable. And so we'll just go on and transition to the end of November. We're still in 2015 when Jake Yoakum, CEO of Company Zero, formerly Conformal Systems, publishes an opinion piece titled Bitcoin's Biggest Challenges. And Jake, Jake, I'll type it in the chat. Something like that. It might be a little incorrect. But no, that actually is correct. Yeah, Jake's a very under the radar guy. You can go listen to some of his stuff on YouTube, and you'll just hear, like, again, someone who's very principled, someone who's very honest about the trade-offs of his systems, and just very transparent. And from what I've learned about him too through other people, he's one of those deeply kind of anti-state type of people. So, someone you can, in my opinion, trust. Anyways, he goes on to publish Bitcoin's Biggest Challenges. And I'll just read you guys what I have here. Company Zero, formerly known as Conformal Systems, have been open source software engineering firm / patrons for years, focused on privacy and security. They previously built CipherWrite, a zero knowledge cloud-based storage software. They built CoinVoice, a Bitcoin payment processor. They also built BTC Suite, renamed BTCD, which is a full node implementation of Bitcoin. These dudes have been around for a while. They build premier software. They chose to work on Bitcoin. And as they chose to do that, they ran into some issues. Their software was eventually forked off and became the foundation of the Lightning Network for Lightning Labs, because they are using the Golang language to build these systems. And Golang is a very interesting language for those of you who are interested in software development. I'm trying to think exactly. Again, I'm not the strongest on the software development stuff, but I know that it's kind of like in my opinion, an interesting mix of C and Python. So it has the readability of Python, from a looking at the code and reading it standpoint, but it has the functionality and distributed capabilities of C to build sort of distributed software. You're welcome, CC. Thank you for jumping in on this live stream, and thank you for your comments. But I think some of the main takeaways here is that these guys they're already doing stuff. They're building stuff. They're not writing white papers. They're out there building. They're doing this across many different applications, from cloud-based storage to payment processors. And their decision to work on BTC Suite was I think it was just driven by pure intellectual interest and just a desire to try something new. And unfortunately, they were met with hostility by some of the Bitcoin Core software developers. And there's a huge debate about, you know, different versions of the code and the dangers of there being different implementations. And I understand. I do understand, which is why Decred solved this issue of implementation risk, if you will, and the possibility of there being a contentious fork where you have one implementation. You can think about this as like, for those who are not quite familiar with software development, I like to think about it in terms of Firefox versus Internet Explorer versus Google Chrome, right? These are all implementations of getting on the internet. But let's say, because Bitcoin and blockchain is about reaching consensus and about things being what's true on Firefox is true on Internet Explorer. If you go on Internet Explorer and Internet Explorer, you type in facebook.com and it brings you one location, but you go on Google Chrome and you type in facebook.com and it brings you somewhere different, right? That's an issue. And you can't have that on a blockchain. That's very bad. You could fix it in regards to, anyways. Looks like there's another comment. I'll try to respond. Greetings from a fellow Decred holder. Hello, welcome. Thank you very much. I love seeing that there's actually someone watching this who is a Decred hodler. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So far, we're only on Spotify and a few other. There is also, you can see on my featured channels there, guys. I have 2 other YouTube channels. One of them is the Stake Podcast. Stake Podcast is on Spotify. Hopefully, it'll be on Apple soon, but it is also on YouTube. And I'm just going to keep this thing going. Yes, CC, take your time. It's definitely very interesting, something I'm very passionate about. And stick around and learn. It's very exciting. But you definitely, something you want to take slowly. Definitely. So in his article, Jake Yokompaya outlines 3 different issues. That he outlines are governance, funding, and the proof of work miners have too much power. And so governance, in short, the governance system is an informal oligarchy of Bitcoin Core developers. This is what Jake says. I do see this as, I would debate it, right? Pierre Richard, he's well known in the space, and he sees Bitcoin's governance as anarchic governance. I don't think that's actually accurate either. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle, because it is indisputable that the core developers have immense amount of control of Bitcoin. And as you think about the history of Bitcoin, you go back to the byte or the block size debates in 2016, 17. On one side, you had huge corporations who were advocating for a certain agenda, and you had the community who, I guess, a silent majority who wanted a different agenda. And ultimately, the threat of a hard fork through the use of a soft fork mechanism resulted in a conclusion to that debate by people simply choosing the software that they wanted to run, and that being where the miners eventually put their power. So funding is very interesting. That was what I just said was probably very unclear and maybe even a little inaccurate, but we're going to move on. Some of the other major issues that Jake talked about or discovered in that article was funding for Bitcoin Core. Developers are reliant on donations, which donations and venture capital money doesn't always align with the interest of the community, because with, whether it be Blockstream or whatever business that is essentially accepting those donations, the developers are, whether they want to admit it or not, they're going to be incentivized to prioritize those people's desires within the Bitcoin ecosystem. So that's the second issue. And the third issue is a theoretical issue. Miners can censor. Miners can refuse to upgrade. This might not be a problem yet, but Jake believes it will likely be in the future. There's also the problem of mining concentration, which we used to hear a lot about. I think that that's probably something that'll just play itself out over time. And the mining of empty blocks, right? And so miners can try to cheat the system and mine empty blocks, and there's no punishment for that. In Decred, there is a punishment for that. And there's also a check system so that, I mean, those miners are not going to get any rewards if they try to do some scammy stuff like that. Fast forwarding to December 7th, 2015, Jake Yochim publishes another post on Company Zero's blog titled Iterating. He says that he/they have been working for the past 1.5 years on a new project to fix the issues that he outlined in his previous posts. He also says that the most fundamental of these changes is the hybrid proof of work, proof of stake, as well as proof of activity by Ido Bentov, Charlie Lee, and others. So at the core of Decred's change from Bitcoin is the change in the consensus model. Decred, from my knowledge, is the first project to implement something of this nature. And proof of work, hopefully if you're watching this, you've heard of this term before, but proof of work is the expending of electricity on computational power to secure a blockchain. So you burn electricity because you have a computer. You have to run that computer. That computer has to run very specifically. In order for that computer to run, you have to burn electricity. And by burning electricity, you're tying the blockchain to a physical, or not physical, but like to, I guess, something in the real world, as it were. And this was one of the genius design implementations of Satoshi Nakamoto, and the team didn't want to get rid of that, because don't fix what's not broken, right? Like, proof of work is beautiful, but it did have some flaws. And a proof of stake system, which there's different ways you could implement this. Decred has done so in a very unique way that involves time locking and being rewarded for that, and not losing control of your funds. Proof of stake is essentially locking up your money for a certain amount of time. That's what staking means. You lock up your money. And the system is, you have proof of work, which is kind of the base layer of decentralized consensus. And then the proof of stake system is kind of bolted on top as like a check on the proof of work system. So it's like a check and balance almost, if you will, which I find very interesting from just like a constitutional law perspective. And we're going to start talking a little bit about the Constitution, because in order to create a sustainable system of governance, Decred decided to create a constitution. And this constitution will be the focus of my next episode. They extend the notion of consensus hybridization to apply more generally as one of the several layers in a stratified consensus system. And in my opinion, this is one of the genius parts of their design, because it required a lot of thought and it required a lot of game theoretic scenarios. And proof of stake miners get to vote yes or no on the block proposed by the proof of work miners. The resulting vote can result in all or some of the block reward being taken away. Do I think proof of work is vulnerable? I think that there can only be one truly dominantly secured proof of work chain. I think that's what I think. And I mean, I'm basing that off of just kind of a guess, like, prediction really. But I do think that proof of work can only truly be secure as the consensus mechanism for one chain and one chain only. I think other chains are going to have other forms of um, security. And I think that Decred will kind of win the proof of work, proof of stake. So I didn't like entirely come up with this idea on my own. I think who was the first person I heard this from? It might not Checkmate, um, not Mr. Black, but it was one of those other guys who on that consent. I can't remember his name right now. I'm sorry, Permeable Nino. He said this on a podcast episode, and he was basically like, his theory is that there's going to be a dominant proof of work chain, a dominant proof of work, proof of stake chain, and then possibly a dominant proof of stake chain. And I liked that idea because it fit with my belief that there is going to be, maybe 3 to 5 major chains that take up 80 to 90% of the value, and then a long tail of some other cryptocurrencies that exist. But I mean, time will tell, right? I could be very wrong. Oh, no. So I don't think that proof of work is vulnerable. I think that okay, I'm just reading the question out loud for the audience. From the standard Bitcoin perspective, or that the energy consumption itself makes the system more fragile. The energy consumption itself makes the system resilient because it requires you to actually do something. You actually have to spend the electricity, and I just think that proof of work is it's not a vulnerable setup. I just think that like other chains, essentially, there's no point of using a proof of work chain that doesn't have the most security. So because Bitcoin has such a lead in its proof of work, right? And just the way that ASICs have developed over time, like there's no point in using Ethereum because it's just so less secure than Bitcoin as a proof of work system. There's no security. It's not as secure. I mean, Ethereum Classic keeps getting attacked. And I think that, coins that decide to stay proof of work over time are going to get attacked. And yeah, that's what I'm not saying Ethereum is going to get attacked because I think they do have a lot of, power and would be very costly. But just like the difference of being the dominant one, the top winner of proof of work, and then all the things underneath it, like there's no point of being number 5 on the proof of work competing like ladder, if you will. Smart contracts. I'm gonna have to hold off on that question, CC. I will, because I do want to. I don't want this podcast to be an hour, and I would have to get really off topic with that. But these are great questions, and maybe I can do a different stream one day where, yeah, yeah, or hit me up on Twitter. That's dope. Hit me up on Twitter or Instagram, elima_III, and we could talk there. Um, So we're gonna start trying to. I'm gonna run through these bullet points, hopefully, kind of quickly, but I'll probably. This is gonna be longer than an hour. So something else that Decred did is they created a 10% development fund from each block reward. This was done in order to get rid of the conflict of interest problems seen in the Bitcoin core development process. Blockstream is incentivized to keep 1 megabyte blocks because of side chains. So essentially, the protocol takes 10% of each block reward and initially gives it or puts it aside in a fund that goes towards development. And so this is very powerful because if you're working on Bitcoin Core, you're essentially having to either get paid by a company. So then if you're getting a paycheck from a company, you have to do what the company tells you, or you're at the, trying to get some philanthropists to donate to you, which I mean, these are very skilled individuals and they just shouldn't be having to spend their time or worried about getting donations to do this work, and it's worked for Bitcoin for so far. And I believe it will continue to work for Bitcoin. But I think it's very powerful to have the protocol paying the developers. Essentially 10% of the block rewards gets put aside. In right now, my understanding is that that is a central point of failure, right? That is, those funds are controlled by an LLC and they distribute that, but it has to be voted on by the community. But I believe before the end of 2021, for sure, that will become automated process as well. So it'll be tied to Politeia, and funds will not be released until voters vote or till the stakeholders vote on the releasing of that fund. So essentially, you're just getting rid of that central point of failure that exists right now. But that 10% is very powerful because, I mean, if you have these smart people working on the protocols, you essentially want them to be getting paid in that protocol because now the incentives are all completely aligned. They're working on something that they're getting paid for in that currency, and hopefully staking that eventually or cashing it out for whatever they need to pay their bills. It's still just a very, very powerful thing. And the stratified consensus system places a check on the proof of work miners by creating a second layer of consensus in the form of proof of stake. The creators saw weaknesses in pure proof of stake. The main issue, they said, is that nothing is at stake. Instead of there being a currency-wide lottery, they created a ticket system where members of proof of stake have to lock up their Decred in order to participate in the proof of stake. Tickets are chosen through a lottery system where the average lockup period is 30 days. Could be longer, could be shorter. This creates an incentive to hold the coins for a long period of time, and it also creates a return to old school banking where you receive interest on your deposit. Proof of work miners have to include proof of stake tickets in order to receive their rewards. This stratified consensus layer created 3 rather than 2 layers of consensus. In Bitcoin, if proof of work and proof of developers. In Decred, you have proof of stake miners, which puts the ultimate power in the hands of the currency holders. The Constitution was also added in Decred. This was contentious. They were not sure if they should create a mission statement similar to the Federal Reserve or Constitution. They ended up on a Constitution. A lot can be said about this document, and we will focus more on the Constitution in the second episode. The Constitution includes a description of the consensus rules. It outlines how disputes will be resolved. The Constitution manages expectations. The concept of a fixed number of coins is essential to the system. It's social consensus that keeps it intact. I doubt it could ever pass that the 21 million coins would change because it is in the Constitution. This would be like, taking away freedom of speech in America. It's just something that I seriously doubt could ever happen. But you can choose not to join Decred if you don't like the Constitution. You don't have to participate in this system. And there will be many who choose not to, and that is fine. And Jake ends his post by saying, we will launch in 1 week. And he also, in his post, this post, he says there will be a 4% pre-mine, and this pre-mine is open to anyone. So why did they have this 4% pre-mine? It's because the Decred required staking because it was a hybrid system. So essentially, and I've read the math somewhere. Oh no, we're gonna do the breakdown essentially of like why this 4% pre-mine, essentially why I'm okay with it and why it's not a big deal for me. Because on December 14th, Jake Joachim Pyatt releases Rethinking Digital Currency, and he also previews the initial logo of Decred, which was terrible. And Jake Joachim Pyatt, that's JYK. There we go. Jake Joachim Pyatt outlines all the technical upgrades to the new system in this post, and he tells us about the 60-30%. So we're going to go into some of the technical upgrades, but in this post, Rethinking Digital Currency, Jake, for the first time, says 60% of the block rewards is going to go to proof of work miners, and 30% is going to go to the proof of stake holders. Cold staking is one of the technical upgrades. Blake 256 was chosen as the algorithm for Decred. There's still 21 million coins. And he then goes into the initial funding of the 4% and the airdrop, because yes, that some of those 4% pre-mine coins were given away to the community for free. Um, the major takeaway, the cost that Company Zero incurred for the development of Decred was $250,000, and Company Zero paid for this out of pocket initially, and then essentially they this could be wrong, but part of the coins that they initially gave to themselves was at a rate of yep, they started at a rate of 0.49 per coin. So they said, okay, each of these coins is worth 50 cents, and we're giving enough of these coins to pay the developers for their work. So the developers eventually got paid in Decred, which to me, again, you want these smart people holding your coins. You want these people, because then they have skin in the game. They have a reason to develop on this, on Decred. And some people don't like pre-mines. Fair enough. Like, again, you don't have to participate. But to me, I'm okay with it, because it's a small price to pay for the hard work of these developers. In the post, Rethinking Digital Currency, he goes on to outline all the work that the developers have done. It's very important that this is not a secret pre-mine like Ethereum. The pre-mine was very transparent. Ethereum never talked about their pre-mine. They just did it. And it was 60% of the coins that were given out to, companies and consensus, et cetera, et cetera. And no developers got coins for free. All the developers who received coins for their work. And the total pre-mine of Decred came out to about 8% of coins, 4% going to developers. The other 4% was distributed to the community for free. And all you had to do was sign up, and you just sent them an email saying, hey, I've been keeping up with the project. I would like to participate in this airdrop of coins. And they did a very thorough process to make sure no one was double signing up. So some sort of, it wasn't really KYC, but essentially just working very diligently to make sure people are not, signing up 10 times to receive a bunch of coins. And the free capped coins were capped at 5,000 coins per individual. And this is also very powerful, because essentially by creating a wide dispersion of the coins initially and allowing people to receive them for free, it created a much more fair, accurate, robust market for Decred. And once Decred hit the open market on exchanges, you don't have the same sort of price action that you saw with Zcash, where one Zcash was trading for 5 Bitcoin whenever it first launched, simply because, well, it wasn't widely distributed. So the people who had it were able to sell it for whatever price they wanted. And the airdrop was necessary for the decentralization of the proof of stake system. I think that's very important. It's not like they did this just for fun. The projected launch date that Jake gave in that article was January 18th of 2016. And on January 27th of 2016, the testnet launched. And on February 8th of 2016, the mainnet launched, along with the Constitution, which will be the subject of our next podcast. So I'm going to look at the chat one more time. All right, CC, let's definitely keep chatting. I love your questions, and thank you for just participating in this. It means a lot to me. Okay. And that's for anyone out there, at elima_III on Twitter, which is where I shit post, and on Instagram as well, which is where I post photos of my son. So if you're into babies, which is probably no one on this podcast, yeah, you can go check out more about my real life and my real estate and my law journey, all behind the scenes stuff, if you just want to keep up like that. But I think I'm going to end this podcast here. Thank you guys for those of you who tuned in. Thank you guys for the likes. Much love. Please go subscribe to Stake Podcast YouTube if this is, just so I can have people actually following that account. I'm going to continue to live stream East Corner here, and then certain episodes of East Corner is going to be, forked over there. And also in the description of this video, eventually there will be a Decred address where you can feel free to donate. I just like to put this out there. 10 million atoms, an atom is the smallest unit of Decred. 10 million atoms is less than $2. And that could go a long ways to helping me save up more Decred and stack more Decred so that I can become a ticket holder. So thank you guys for watching this, and I'll see you in the next episode.